The shriek that tore through Nexus Station's central plaza made every species stop what they were doing. It wasn't the mechanical wail of an alarm or the hiss of escaping atmosphere. It was pure, raw terror from a child's throat. Kale pressed his small blue hands against his mother's chest, feeling the slow, irregular heartbeat beneath her silver robes. Her breathing had become shallow an hour ago, and now her normally luminescent skin flickered like a dying star. The geometric patterns that normally glowed soft purple along her neck and temples had gone completely dark. "Please!" Kale screamed again, his voice cracking as he looked up at the hundreds of beings flowing past him in the plaza's endless stream of commerce. "My mother won't wake up. Someone help us!" A group of tall, crystalline Valdorians approached, their faces reflecting the plaza's neon lights like living prisms. They bent down to examine Kale's mother, their musical voices harmonizing as they spoke in rapid consultation. After a few moments, they straightened and shook their translucent heads. "Zephyrian neural cascade." One of them chimed sadly, "We cannot help. Our biology is too different." They glided away, leaving Kale alone again. A merchant from the insectoid hive collective scuttled over next, its compound eyes scanning the unconscious woman with clinical interest. Its mandibles clicked as it spoke through its translator. "Medical emergency detected. Recommend immediate transport to Xenobiology Center. Cost: 15,000 credits. "I don't have 15,000 credits." Kale sobbed. "Please, she's dying." The merchant's antennae twitched with what might have been sympathy, but it said nothing more before moving on. One by one they came and went. The reptilian Sorens shook their scaled heads. The gaseous nebulans couldn't interact with solid matter safely. The mechanical synthetics ran diagnostic scans but found no compatible treatment protocols. Each species offered the same response. They were sorry, but Zephyrian biology was too alien, too complex, too different from their own. Kale's sobs echoed off the plaza's glass dome as the crowd began to thin. His mother's skin grew dimmer with each passing minute, and he could feel her slipping away from him like water through his fingers. That's when he saw her. A human woman in a dirty maintenance jumpsuit had stopped about 10 meters away. She wasn't tall like the Valdorians or imposing like the Sorens. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held a weariness that spoke of too many disappointments. But she was looking at him, really looking, not just glancing as she passed by. "Help!" Kale called out, his voice hoarse from screaming. "Please, my mother." The woman approached slowly, her steps careful and deliberate. She knelt beside Kale's mother, and he caught the scent of machine oil and ozone that clung to her uniform. Her hands moved with surprising gentleness as she checked his mother's pulse and breathing. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Kale," he whispered. "And this is my mother, Lyrina. She just collapsed. No one can help us." The woman's eyes met his, and for the first time in hours, Kale didn't see pity or dismissal. He saw determination. "My name is Sarah," she said. "Dr. Sarah Chen. And I'm going to help you." "But you're human," Kale said, confusion mixing with desperate hope. "Everyone says humans don't know enough about alien biology to." "Everyone says a lot of things," Sarah interrupted, already pulling a small scanner from her toolkit. "Most of it's wrong." She ran the device over his mother's body, frowning at the readings. The scanner beeped softly, displaying information in symbols Kale couldn't read. But Sarah's expression grew more focused with each passing second. "This isn't natural," she muttered. "The neural cascade isn't following normal patterns. Something triggered this artificially." "What does that mean?" Kale asked. Sarah looked up at him, her expression grave. "It means your mother was poisoned, Kale. And if we don't find the antidote soon, she's going to die." The plaza's ambient noise seemed to fade away as the weight of her words sank in. Someone had tried to kill his mother. But why? She was just a linguist working on translation protocols for the Galactic Council. She'd never hurt anyone. "Can you save her?" Kale whispered. Sarah stood up, her jaw set with determination. "I don't know, but I'm sure as hell going to try." She began gathering Larina's unconscious form in her arms, her movements efficient despite the awkwardness of the position. "We need to get her to my workshop. I have equipment there that might help." As Sarah lifted his mother, Cale saw something he'd missed before. A small, almost invisible mark on the back of his mother's neck. It looked like a tiny puncture wound, already beginning to heal. "Someone injected her with something," he said, pointing to the mark. Sarah's eyes hardened. "Then we're not just fighting time anymore, Cale. We're fighting whoever did this to her." As Sarah lifted his mother, Cale saw something he'd missed before. A small, almost invisible mark on the back of his mother's neck. It looked like a tiny puncture wound, already beginning to heal. "Someone injected her with something," he said, pointing to the mark. Sarah's eyes hardened. "Then we're not just fighting time anymore, Cale. We're fighting whoever did this to her." Sarah's workshop occupied a forgotten corner of Nexus Station's maintenance level, hidden behind layers of pipes and conduits that hummed with the station's life support systems. The air was thick with the smell of lubricants and ozone, but it was clean, sterile, even. As she carried Larina through the cramped doorway, Cale was amazed by what he saw. The walls were lined with equipment he didn't recognize. Some clearly human-made, others obviously salvaged from a dozen different species. Holographic displays flickered with data streams in multiple languages. A bioscanner twice the size of anything in the station's medical bay dominated one corner, its sensors already activating as Sarah approached. "This isn't a maintenance workshop," Cale whispered. "No," Sarah said, gently placing his mother on the examination table that emerged from the floor. "It's not." She moved with practiced efficiency, attaching monitoring devices to Larina's still form. The displays around them came alive with readings, heart rate, neural activity, cellular metabolism. All of them were dropping. "Who are you really?" Cale asked, watching Sarah's hands dance across control panels with the skill of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Sarah paused, her fingers hovering over a complex molecular analyzer. "Someone who made a mistake that cost lives. Someone who's been trying to make up for it ever since." The scanner beeped, and Sarah's face went pale as she read the results. "This is worse than I thought," she muttered. "The toxin is synthetic, engineered specifically for Zephyrian physiology. Whoever did this knows your species' biology better than most Zephyrians do." "But who would want to hurt my mother?" Cale's voice cracked. "She's just a translator. She works with languages, not dangerous things." Sarah looked at him with an expression that was part sympathy, part something darker. "Cale, what languages does your mother work with? Specifically?" "All of them," he said proudly. "She's fluent in over 300 galactic languages. The Council uses her for the really difficult translations, ancient texts, dead languages, things from before the unified era." Sarah's hands stilled on the controls. "Ancient texts. She's been working on something really old lately, from the predecessor ruins on Kepler 442b. She said it was the most important discovery in 1,000 years, but she couldn't tell me what it was because of Council security protocols." The color drained from Sarah's face. "The predecessor site, of course." She turned back to the scanner with renewed urgency. "Cale, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think very carefully. In the last few days, has anyone new come to visit your mother? Anyone asking questions about her work?" Cale closed his eyes, trying to remember. "There was someone yesterday, a Valdorian diplomat named CRYSTHNAN. He said he was from the Cultural Exchange Division, but—" He opened his eyes, looking troubled. "But he asked weird questions. Not about culture or language, but about security protocols. About where my mother kept her work files." Sarah cursed in a language Cale didn't recognize. "CRYSTHNAN isn't from Cultural Exchange. He's from Valdorian Intelligence. And if he's involved, this is bigger than just one poisoning." She moved to a different console, her fingers flying over the controls. New displays materialized, showing molecular structures and chemical compounds. "The toxin in your mother's system is based on Valdorian neurosuppressants, but it's been modified, enhanced. Whoever created this wanted to ensure that even if your mother survived, she'd never be able to translate anything again. Why? Kale whispered. Because she found something, Sarah said grimly. Something in those predecessor texts that someone desperately wants to keep secret. The main scanner chimed with an urgent tone. Lorena's vital signs were dropping faster now, her luminescent skin barely glowing at all. Sarah's hands moved frantically across the controls, trying different combinations of treatments, but nothing was working. I can synthesize a partial antidote, she said, sweat beading on her forehead. But I need more information about the base compound. I need to know exactly what they used. How do we find that out? Kale asked. Sarah's jaw tightened. We asked the person who poisoned her. She pulled up a security feed from the station's central computer, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces with illegal precision. I still have some old access codes from my days with the council. They probably think they've been deleted, but... The screen flickered, then stabilized, showing the plaza where they'd found Lorena. There, Sarah said, pointing to a figure in the background of the recording. CRYSTHNAN. He was watching when your mother collapsed. Kale stared at the image. The Valdorian diplomat looked calm, almost bored, as chaos erupted around Lorena's unconscious form. But his crystalline face was turned in their direction, and his body language suggested he was waiting for something. He was waiting to see if anyone would help her, Kale realized. He wanted to make sure she died, but he didn't count on a human maintenance worker getting involved, Sarah said with grim satisfaction. Lucky for us, Valdorians are arrogant. They think they're the smartest species in the galaxy, and they underestimate everyone else. She turned to another console, this one clearly cobbled together from salvaged parts. I'm going to hack into Valdorian diplomatic communications. If we can find out what compound they used, I can synthesize a proper antidote. Is that legal? Kale asked. Sarah looked at him with tired eyes. Kale, nothing I'm doing right now is legal. I'm using stolen equipment in an unlicensed medical facility to treat a patient without proper authorization. And now I'm about to commit espionage against a council member species. But your mother is dying. And sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. Her fingers moved across the makeshift interface with practiced ease. Lines of code scrolled past, too fast for Kale to follow. After several tense minutes, Sarah smiled grimly. Got it, she said. Encrypted diplomatic channel between CRYSTHNAN and someone on Valder Prime. The encryption is good, but I've seen better. The screen filled with translated text as Sarah's decryption program worked. What Kale read made his blood run cold. Translation terminated as planned. Linguist will not recover. Predecessor secret remains secure. Awaiting further instructions. And the response, excellent. Phase 2 initiated. Eliminate all witnesses. Sarah's face went white. All witnesses, she repeated. Kale, that means? Me, Kale whispered. They're going to kill me too. Not if I have anything to say about it, Sarah said fiercely. She turned back to the molecular analyzer, her movements now driven by desperate urgency. I know what compound they used now. I can synthesize an antidote, but it's going to take time we don't have. The workshop's lights flickered, and an automated voice echoed through the hidden chamber. Security alert. Unauthorized access detected. Station security responding. Sarah and Kale looked at each other in horror. They were out of time. The pounding on Sarah's workshop door echoed through the cramped space like hammer blows against metal. Between each impact, Kale could hear voices. Not the mechanical tones of station security, but the musical harmonics of Valdorian speech. They found us, Sarah whispered, her hands still working frantically at the molecular synthesizer. A pale blue liquid was slowly forming in the containment chamber, drop by precious drop. The antidote needs 10 more minutes. We don't have 10 minutes. The door shuddered under another impact. Whatever they were using to break through was making quick work of Sarah's security locks. Dr. Chun, came a voice from outside, its crystalline tones carrying false politeness. Please open the door. We simply wish to discuss the patient's condition with you. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Right? Discuss it with plasma rifles, no doubt. She moved to a control panel on the far wall, her fingers dancing across interfaces Kale couldn't understand. The workshop around them began to change. Walls shifted, floors reconfigured, and suddenly there was a narrow passage where none had existed before. Emergency exit, Sarah explained, scooping up the partial antidote from the synthesizer. I had this place designed with multiple escape routes. Comes from years of paranoia. What about my mother? Kale asked desperately. Sarah was already lifting Lorena's unconscious form, the monitoring equipment automatically detaching as she moved. She comes with us. I'm not leaving her for those bastards to finish the job. The workshop door finally gave way with a screech of torn metal. Crystalline figures poured through the opening, their bodies refracting the chamber's light into deadly rainbows. Kale caught a glimpse of Sir Westichnan at their head, his face set in what might have been anger or satisfaction. It was hard to tell with Valdorians. This way, Sarah hissed, carrying Lorena into the narrow passage. Kale followed, his heart hammering against his ribs as the tunnel sealed itself behind them. They emerged into a maintenance corridor 3 levels down, the air here thick with the smell of recycled atmosphere and industrial lubricants. Sarah's breathing was labored from carrying Lorena, but she pressed on without complaint. Where are we going? Kale asked. The old medical bay, Sarah replied. It was decommissioned years ago when they built the new Xenobiology Center, but the equipment is still functional. More importantly, it's off the station's main grid. They won't be able to track us there. They moved through a maze of service corridors, Sarah's knowledge of the station's hidden pathways guiding them past security checkpoints and surveillance nodes. Twice they had to hide as patrols passed by. Not station security, but armed Valdorians who definitely weren't there in any official capacity. The old medical bay was exactly as Sarah had described, abandoned but functional. Dust covered most surfaces, but the biobeds still hummed with power when Sarah activated them. She gently placed Lorena on the central unit, connecting her to monitoring systems that immediately began displaying vital signs. She's stable for now, Sarah said, checking the readings. But without the complete antidote, the neural cascade will resume in a few hours. We bought ourselves time, nothing more. She pulled out the partial antidote she'd synthesized, a vial of pale blue liquid that seemed to glow with its own inner light. This will slow the process, but it won't stop it. I need the final component, and that means accessing Valdorian biomedical databases. How do we do that? Kale asked. Sarah's smile was predatory. We're going to steal it. She moved to one of the old terminals, her fingers working to bring the ancient system online. Valdorians are paranoid about their medical technology. They keep everything on isolated networks, accessible only from their diplomatic quarters. But there's one weakness in their security. The terminal flickered to life, displaying schematics of Nexus Station's diplomatic sector. Sarah highlighted a section near the Valdorian embassy. They use crystalline data cores to store their most sensitive information, quantum encrypted, nearly impossible to hack remotely. But if you have physical access, she trailed off, studying the building's layout. You want to break into the Valdorian embassy, Kale said flatly. I want to save your mother, Sarah corrected. The embassy break-in is just a means to an end. Kale looked at his mother's still form, her skin now so dim he could barely make out the patterns along her neck. What can I do? Sarah looked at him seriously. This is going to be dangerous, Kale. More dangerous than anything you've ever done. I can't ask a child to. She's my mother, Kale interrupted. I'm not a child anymore. Tell me what to do. Sarah studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Valdorian security systems are designed to detect adult-sized intruders. But someone your size, someone who knows how to move quietly, she brought up more detailed schematics. There's a ventilation shaft that runs directly over their secure data storage. Too small for an adult, but perfect for someone your size. She pointed to a section of the embassy's upper levels. The quantum core containing their medical databases is here. If you can get close enough to attach this, she held up a small device that looked like a metallic spider, It will extract the information we need. What does it do? Quantum tap, Sarah explained. It creates a temporary bridge between their isolated network and this. She patted a portable data unit. Military-grade hardware. Cost me 3 years of savings to acquire it on the black market. Cale took the device, surprised by how light it was. How do I know which data core to target? Sarah pulled up an image of crystalline structures, each one pulsing with different colored light. Medical databases pulse blue-green. You'll know it when you see it. She began gathering equipment from around the abandoned medical bay, climbing gear, a communication headset, and several items Cale couldn't identify. I'll create a distraction at the embassy's main entrance. Something big enough to draw security away from the upper levels. You'll have maybe 15 minutes before they realize what's really happening. And if I get caught? Sarah's expression was grim. Then your mother dies, and probably both of us along with her. The Valdorians don't take espionage lightly, especially when it involves their medical secrets. A soft chime from the monitoring equipment drew their attention back to Lorena. Her vital signs were fluctuating, the neural cascade beginning to reassert itself despite the partial antidote. We're out of time, Sarah said. We do this now or we lose her. Cale looked at his mother one last time, memorizing her face in case he never saw her alive again. Then he turned to Sarah with determination that surprised them both. Let's go steal some Valdorian secrets. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Cale saw hope in her eyes. That's the spirit. But first, I need to tell you something about why I'm really helping you. She pulled out a small holographic projector, activating it with a touch. The image that appeared made Cale gasp. It was a Zephyrian woman, older than his mother but with the same luminescent skin and gentle eyes. Her name was Zira, Sarah said quietly. She was a xenobiologist like I used to be. She was also my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Cale stared at the image. What happened to her? She discovered something, Sarah said, her voice tight with old pain. Something about Valdorian medical experiments on other species. When she tried to expose it, they made her disappear. Officially, it was an accident during a research expedition. Unofficially, she deactivated the projector. I've been waiting 5 years for a chance to get close to Valdorian medical data. Your mother's situation might be the opportunity I've been looking for. You're using us, Cale said, but there was no accusation in his voice. I'm helping us help each other, Sarah corrected. Your mother's life depends on getting that antidote formula. My need for justice depends on accessing their databases. Sometimes the universe aligns things perfectly. She shouldered her equipment pack and headed for the door. Ready to save your mother and maybe bring down some very bad people at the same time? Cale followed her into the corridor. The quantum tap device clutched tightly in his small hand. Let's do it. The Valdorian embassy rose like a crystalline mountain from Nexus Station's diplomatic quarter, its faceted walls refracting the artificial starlight into complex geometric patterns. From their position in the maintenance tunnels below, Cale could see the building's intricate security grid, laser barriers that danced between the spires, guard drones that patrolled in precise formations, and sensor arrays that monitored every approach. Beautiful, isn't it? Sarah whispered beside him, checking her equipment one final time. They build their architecture to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. Very effective psychological warfare. Cale studied the ventilation shaft Sarah had identified, a narrow opening near the building's apex that would require him to climb nearly 40 meters of sheer crystal wall to reach. His small hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the climbing harness Sarah had improvised from maintenance equipment. Remember, Sarah said, activating the communication headset around his neck. You have exactly 15 minutes from the moment I start the distraction. The quantum tap needs 30 seconds of direct contact with the medical core to extract what we need. Find the blue-green crystal, attach the device, wait for the confirmation signal, then get out. What if there are guards inside? Sarah's expression was grim. Valdorians don't post guards in their secure areas. They rely on their technology. But if you encounter anyone, She handed him a small cylindrical device. Emergency teleporter. One use only, and it'll bring you directly back to the medical bay. Don't hesitate to use it if things go wrong. Across the plaza, the embassy's main entrance was busy with evening diplomatic traffic. Valdorian officials glided between the crystal spires, their translucent forms catching and bending the light in mesmerizing patterns. None of them looked like they expected trouble. "Sarah," Kale said quietly, "what really happened to Zira?" Sarah's hands stilled on her equipment pack. She found evidence that the Valdorians were conducting illegal genetic experiments on captured members of other species, trying to synthesize abilities they didn't naturally possess: Zephyrian bioluminescence, human adaptability, Sorin regeneration. When she tried to bring the evidence to the Galactic Council, her transport ship suffered a catastrophic system failure. No survivors, no recoverable data. "But you don't believe it was an accident?" "The ship's engineer was human," Sarah said bitterly. "Someone I'd trained personally. She would never have made the kind of mistakes the official report claimed. But I couldn't prove murder, and after the investigation concluded, I found myself blacklisted from every legitimate research position in the galaxy." Kale looked at the embassy again, seeing it now not as a beautiful structure but as a fortress hiding terrible secrets. "If we expose them, will it bring Zira back?" "No," Sarah said simply. "But it might prevent them from doing to other families what they did to mine, and what they're trying to do to yours." She activated a small device that looked like a modified emergency beacon. "This is going to cause a very convincing reactor leak alarm in the embassy's lower levels. Every security officer in the building will be rushing to contain what they think is a potential catastrophe." "That's your window." Kale nodded, pulling on the gloves that would help him grip the crystal walls. The building's surface looked smooth from a distance, but he could see tiny imperfections, stress fractures and construction joints that would provide handholds if he was careful. "One more thing," Sarah said, her voice serious. "If you find anything in their databases about experiments on Zephyrians, anything at all, copy it. Your mother might not be the first person they've targeted." Before Kale could respond, Sarah pressed a button on her device. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the embassy. Emergency lights bathed the crystal spires in angry red as security personnel poured out of the main entrance, heading for the lower levels. "Go," Sarah whispered. Kale sprinted across the plaza, using the chaos and confusion to mask his approach to the embassy's base. The climbing route Sarah had identified was on the building's blind side, hidden from the main security sensors by an artistic outcropping of crystal formations. The first few meters were the hardest. The embassy's walls were designed to look impossibly smooth, but Kale's small fingers found purchase in microscopic flaws that would have been useless to an adult climber. His Zephyrian physiology helped. His species had evolved on a world of towering crystal forests, and climbing was as natural to him as walking. "Status report," Sarah's voice crackled in his earpiece. 10 meters up," Kale whispered, not daring to speak louder. "The alarms are really loud down there." "Good. That means they're taking the threat seriously. Keep climbing." 20 meters. 30. The station's artificial atmosphere grew thinner at this height, but Kale's lungs adapted automatically. Below him, he could see security teams swarming around the embassy's base, their movements coordinated but frantic. "Approaching the ventilation shaft," he reported. The opening was exactly where Sarah had said it would be, hidden behind a decorative crystal formation that looked like abstract art from ground level. Kale squeezed through the narrow aperture, grateful for his small size, as he entered the embassy's internal air circulation system. The ducts were larger than he'd expected, but still cramped enough that he had to crawl on his hands and knees. Soft bioluminescent strips provided minimal lighting, casting everything in an eerie blue-green glow that reminded him uncomfortably of his mother's failing skin. "I'm inside," he whispered, "following the route you mapped." "Excellent. You should reach the data core chamber in about 5 minutes. Remember, blue-green pulsing light." The ventilation system carried sounds from throughout the building, running footsteps, shouted orders in musical Valdorian speech, and the constant wail of emergency alarms. Whatever Sarah had done to fake the reactor leak, it was thoroughly convincing. Kale reached the junction Sarah had marked on his mental map and peered through a ventilation grate into the chamber below. His breath caught in his throat. The room was filled with hundreds of crystalline data cores, each one pulsing with its own rhythm and color. Red cores, yellow ones, deep purple structures that hurt to look at directly. And there, in the center of the array, a cluster of cores pulsing with the blue-green light of medical data. But that wasn't what made Kale's blood run cold. Floating in crystalline suspension chambers around the medical cores were biological samples, tissue specimens, genetic material, and what looked like entire organs from dozens of different species. He could see Soren scale samples, nebular gas clusters, human neural tissue, and, "Oh no," he whispered. In the largest suspension chamber, pulsing with the same rhythm as the medical cores, was a section of Zephyrian neural tissue. The geometric patterns along its surface were identical to the ones on his mother's neck. "Kale? What's wrong?" Sarah's voice was sharp with concern. "They have Zephyrian tissue samples," Kale said, his voice shaking. "Lots of them, and I think they've been experimenting on us for a long time." "Copy everything," Sarah said urgently. "Every file, every database. We need proof of what they're doing." Kale carefully removed the ventilation grate and dropped into the chamber. The quantum tap device felt impossibly heavy in his hand as he approached the central cluster of medical cores. Up close, he could see data streams flowing through the crystals like liquid light, research notes, experimental procedures, and what looked like genetic modification protocols. He attached the quantum tap to the largest core and waited for the confirmation signal. 30 seconds had never felt so long. The device beeped softly, and Kale saw the data transfer progress bar appear on its small display. Terabytes of information flowed through the quantum bridge, medical procedures, biological samples, experimental results, and, "Sarah," he whispered, staring at one particular data stream. "I found something about my mother." "What do you mean?" "She wasn't randomly poisoned," Kale said, his voice hollow with realization. "They've been planning this for months. The translation work, the predecessor texts, it was all a setup to get her here, to get access to her neural patterns." The quantum tap finished its work, the progress bar reaching completion just as footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Kale quickly detached the device and looked around for somewhere to hide, but the chamber was too exposed. The door burst open, and HFY entered with 2 armed guards. His crystalline face reflected the chamber's light as his gaze fell on Kale. "Well," the Valdorian said, his musical voice carrying cold amusement, "it seems we have a little spy." HFY's guards moved with liquid grace, their crystalline bodies refracting the chamber's light as they surrounded Kale. Their weapons, sleek energy rifles that hummed with barely contained power, were trained on his small form with mechanical precision. "Put the device down, young Zephyrian," HFY said, his voice carrying the musical harmonics of his species. "Slowly. No sudden movements." Kale clutched the quantum tap tighter, his mind racing. The emergency teleporter Sarah had given him was in his pocket, but he'd need both hands free to activate it. "You killed my mother," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "Killed?" HFY laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Oh, child, your mother is far too valuable to simply kill. She's been selected for a much greater purpose." The Valdorian gestured to the suspension chambers around them, filled with biological samples from dozens of species. "Each of these represents a breakthrough in our understanding of galactic biology. Your mother's neural patterns, combined with her unique linguistic abilities, will help us decode the final predecessor message." "What predecessor message?" Kale demanded. HFY's eyes gleamed. "The location of their primary research facility, where they conducted their most advanced genetic experiments. The facility your mother was so close to finding before we intervened." Through his earpiece, Kale could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath. "Keep him talking," she whispered, so quietly only he could hear. "I'm tracking your signal. 2 minutes out." "The predecessors died out thousands of years ago," Kale said, trying to buy time. "Why do you care about their research?" "Because they achieved something we've been working toward for centuries," Crystchnan replied, moving closer to examine the data cores. True universal adaptation, the ability to modify any species to survive in any environment, to possess any desired trait. They created the ultimate life form, and then they simply vanished. One of the guards made a harmonious sound that might have been concern. Crystchnan nodded and turned back to Kale. But enough exposition. You have something that belongs to us. He extended a crystalline hand. The quantum tap, if you please. Kale's fingers found the emergency teleporter in his pocket. He just needed to get his other hand free without alerting the guards. What happens to my mother if I give this to you? She'll serve as the template for our neural interface project. Crystchnan said matter-of-factly. Her consciousness will be preserved in crystalline matrix while we study her linguistic capabilities. Quite an honor, really. She'll contribute to the advancement of galactic civilization. She'll be dead. She'll be useful. Rage flooded through Kale's small body. This creature was talking about his mother like she was just another biological sample, something to be dissected and studied. His free hand closed around the teleporter's activation switch. You're monsters, he whispered. We are evolved, Crystchnan corrected. We recognized long ago that the weak races of the galaxy, humans, Zephyrians, Sorans, would never achieve true greatness on their own. We simply help them reach their potential through directed evolution. The chamber's lights suddenly flickered, and an explosion echoed from somewhere deep in the building. The guards' weapons swiveled toward the door as new alarms began blaring. Different from the reactor leak warning, these were proximity alerts. What? Crystchnan began. The chamber's main door exploded inward in a shower of crystal fragments. Sarah burst through the opening, her maintenance coveralls replaced by full combat armor that looked distinctly military. In her hands was a weapon Kale had never seen before, a rifle that crackled with energy discharges that made the air itself shimmer. Stay away from the boy, she snarled. Her weapon trained on Crystchnan. The Valdorian guards opened fire immediately, their energy beams converging on Sarah's position. But she was already moving, her combat armor absorbing the impacts as she rolled behind one of the larger data cores. Return fire filled the chamber with deadly light. The teleporter! Sarah shouted over the weapon's fire. Use it now! But Kale was staring at something that made his blood run cold. One of the suspension chambers near the back of the room contained more than just tissue samples. It held an entire body, perfectly preserved in crystalline fluid. A Zephyrian female with intricate geometric patterns along her neck and temples. His mother. That's not possible, he whispered. My mother is back at the medical bay. She's a clone, Crystchnan said, his voice carrying over the sound of battle. We've had the real Lorena for weeks. The woman you've been trying to save is merely a genetic duplicate, implanted with false memories and programmed to translate the predecessor texts. The chamber spun around Kale as the implications hit him. Everything they'd done, all of Sarah's efforts to synthesize an antidote, the desperate race to save his mother's life, it had all been meaningless. The real Lorena was already dead, floating in alien suspension fluid like a museum specimen. You see why the quantum tap is so important to us, Crystchnan continued, seemingly unconcerned by the firefight raging around him. Your clone mother has served her purpose. Now we need the complete medical data to begin the next phase of our experiments. Sarah's weapon fire had forced the guards back, but more were arriving through the shattered doorway. Her combat armor was showing scorch marks from multiple hits, and Kale could see she was favoring her left arm. The real question, Crystchnan said, his attention focused on Kale, is what we do with you. You've seen far too much to simply release. But perhaps, his crystalline features shifted into what might have been a smile. Perhaps you'd like to join your mother in our research program. Kale looked at the quantum tap in his hand, then at the suspension chamber containing his mother's body, then at Sarah fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. The weight of everything, the deception, the experiments, the casual cruelty of treating sentient beings like laboratory animals, crashed down on him all at once. No, he said quietly. I'm sorry. Crystchnan leaned closer. I said no. Kale's voice grew stronger. No more experiments. No more stealing people from their families. No more turning children into weapons. Crysdhnan's expression shifted to confusion. Child, you seem to misunderstand your situation. You have no power here. You are alone, outnumbered, and Kale activated the Quantum Tap's emergency function. Sarah had mentioned it only in passing during their planning. A last resort feature that would dump the device's entire data store into the galactic communication network, broadcasting everything to every receiver within range. It would destroy the device and any chance of using the data to save his clone mother, but it would also expose the Valdorian experiments to the entire galaxy. What are you doing? Crysdhnan demanded. Making sure everyone knows what you are, Kale said. The quantum tap began to pulse with intense light as it established emergency broadcast protocols. Around the chamber, data cores began flickering as the device drew power from the embassy's own systems to amplify its signal. Stop him, Crysdhnan shrieked. But it was too late. The quantum tap exploded in Kale's hands, releasing a pulse of information that tore through the embassy's communication arrays and out into space. Every news network, every government database, every private communication system within 100 light-years suddenly received the complete files of the Valdorian research program. The revelation would have been shocking enough on its own: illegal experiments, kidnapping, murder. But what made it truly devastating was the scope. The files contained evidence of crimes spanning decades, affecting hundreds of species, involving conspiracy at the highest levels of Valdorian government. In the sudden silence that followed the device's destruction, Kale could hear something new: the sound of shuttle engines approaching the embassy from multiple directions. The cavalry was arriving, but it wasn't Valdorian. Galactic Council security forces, Sarah said, her voice carrying grim satisfaction as she maintained her defensive position. Someone received a very interesting data package. Crysdhnan's crystalline face had gone completely colorless. Around him, his guards were lowering their weapons as the sound of boots echoed in the corridors. Lots of boots, from multiple species, all converging on their position. You have no idea what you've done, the Valdorian whispered. Kale looked at the suspension chamber containing his mother's body, then at the data cores that had documented her murder, then at the alien who had ordered it all. Yes, he said quietly. I do. The Galactic Council's emergency tribunal convened within hours of the data broadcast. Representatives from 47 species gathering in Nexus Station's main assembly hall. Kale sat in the witness section, still wearing the same clothes he'd had on during the embassy infiltration, watching as evidence of Valdorian crimes filled holographic displays throughout the chamber. Sarah sat beside him, her arm in a medical sling but her expression grimly satisfied. The defense attorney is claiming the experiments were conducted by rogue scientists without government approval, she whispered. Kale looked across the chamber to where Crysdhnan sat with his legal team, the Valdorian's crystalline features reflecting the harsh lighting of the tribunal. Do you think anyone believes that? Not after what we found in the deeper files, Sarah replied. The quantum tap pulled everything: financial records, communication logs, authorization codes from the highest levels of Valdorian leadership. This goes all the way to their High Crystal Council. On the main display, a hologram of Dr. Valith Sen, the Council's chief xenobiologist, was presenting her analysis of the stolen data. Her multiple arms gestured at rotating molecular structures as she spoke. The sophistication of these experiments, Dr. Sen was saying, required resources and authorization that could only come from a state-sponsored program. We're looking at systematic biological warfare research spanning at least 50 years. The Valdorian defense attorney, a tall crystalline figure whose name Kale couldn't pronounce, stood to object. Honorable Tribunal, these allegations are based on data obtained through illegal means. The break-in at our embassy was an act of espionage. Objection noted and overruled, interrupted Tribunal Chair Voxtar, a massive Sorin whose scales had darkened with age. The emergency protocols for crimes against sentient life supersede diplomatic immunity. Continue, Dr. Sen. Kale watched the proceedings with a mixture of satisfaction and hollow sadness. Justice was being served, but it wouldn't bring his mother back. The real Lyrina remained in the council's custody, her body perfectly preserved but her consciousness long gone. The clone, the version of his mother he desperately tried to save, had died peacefully in the medical bay while they were infiltrating the embassy. "Kale," Sarah said softly, "it's almost time for your testimony." He nodded, straightening his shoulders. The tribunal had insisted on hearing directly from him about the discovery of his mother's cloning and the circumstances that led to the data theft. He'd been dreading this moment for days. "Witness Kale of Zephyr Prime," Tribunal Chair Voxtar announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Please approach the testimony platform." Kale walked through the silent assembly hall, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. Representatives from species he'd never seen before watched with expressions of curiosity, sympathy, and in some cases, calculation. The Valdorian delegation maintained their crystalline composure, but Kale could see the tension in their posture. The testimony platform elevated him several meters above the chamber floor, holographic recording devices capturing his words and expressions from every angle. Somewhere in the galaxy, millions of beings would be watching this moment. "State your full name and homeworld for the record," instructed the tribunal's recording system. "Kale Lyranthesh of Zephyr Prime, son of linguist Lyrina Veldesh." His voice carried clearly through the chamber, stronger than he'd expected. "Please describe, in your own words, the events that led to your discovery of the Valdorian research program." Kale took a deep breath and began. He told them about his mother's collapse in the plaza, about Sarah's unexpected help, about the desperate race to synthesize an antidote for what they thought was poison. He described the embassy infiltration, the discovery of the biological samples, and the moment when he realized his real mother was already dead. "The hardest part," he said, his voice growing quiet, "wasn't finding out she was gone. It was realizing that the woman I'd been trying to save, the woman Dr. Chun risked everything to help, was never really my mother at all. She was just a copy, a tool they made to translate their stolen artifacts." In the Valdorian section, several delegates shifted uncomfortably. CRYSTHNAN's face remained impassive, but Kale could see the slight dimming of his bioluminescent patterns that indicated stress. "Yet you chose to destroy the quantum tap rather than use its data to potentially save the clone," observed Dr. Sen. "Why?" Kale looked out over the assembled representatives. "Because she wouldn't have wanted to live if it meant letting this continue. My mother, the real one, dedicated her life to helping different species understand each other. She would never have wanted her death to be meaningless." He paused, gathering his courage for what came next. "But there's something else. Something I haven't told anyone yet." The chamber fell silent. Even the Valdorian delegates leaned forward slightly. "Before the quantum tap was destroyed, I saw something in their medical files. They weren't just experimenting on captured specimens. They were planning something bigger, a project called Convergence." The tribunal members exchanged glances. This was new information, not included in the data broadcast. "What did you see?" asked Chair Voxtar. "Genetic modification protocols for every major species in the Council. Not just individual experiments, they were designing a way to modify entire populations at once, to make everyone more like them." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Representatives from dozens of species began talking at once, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound that echoed off the assembly hall's walls. "Order!" Chair Voxtar's voice cut through the chaos. "Witness Kale, are you certain of what you saw?" "Yes, they called it guided evolution. The plan was to release genetic modification agents into the water supplies of major worlds, starting with the most populous systems. Within a generation, every species would begin developing Valdorian characteristics: crystalline skin, enhanced longevity, reduced emotional response. The Valdorian delegation's composure finally cracked. Several delegates began speaking rapidly in their musical language, while their defense attorneys stood to make urgent objections that were immediately overruled. "This is a child's misinterpretation of complex scientific data," CRYSTHNAN said, speaking for the first time since his arrest. The tribunal cannot base policy decisions on the confused observations of. The tribunal can and will, Chair Voxtar interrupted, especially when those observations align with physical evidence recovered from your embassy. Sarah smiled beside the witness platform, her expression vindicated. During the 3 days since the embassy raid, council investigators had found extensive evidence supporting Kale's testimony. The Convergence project was real, and it had been mere months away from implementation. Witness Kale, Dr. Sen said, on behalf of the Galactic Council and the 47-member species represented here, I want to thank you for your courage. Your actions may have prevented the greatest crime against sentient life in galactic history. Kale nodded, but found himself thinking not of praise or recognition, but of his mother, both versions of her. The brilliant linguist who had died trying to unlock ancient secrets, and the clone who had died believing she was real. Both had been victims of the same monstrous ambition. There's one more thing, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. I want to request that all the biological samples in the Valdorian facilities be given proper burial rights according to their species customs. They weren't just research materials. They were people. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, representatives from dozens of species began to stand in acknowledgement. The gesture spread through the assembly until only the Valdorian delegation remained seated. Chair Voxtar's ancient features softened slightly. So ordered. The council will ensure that all victims of this program receive the dignity they were denied in death. As Kale stepped down from the testimony platform, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't realized was there. His mother was gone, and nothing would bring her back. But her death had meaning now. It had exposed a conspiracy that threatened every free species in the galaxy. Sarah was waiting for him at the platform's base, her expression proud but sad. What now? She asked. Kale looked around the assembly hall, at representatives from worlds he'd never seen, species he'd never encountered. The galaxy suddenly seemed much larger and more complex than he'd ever imagined. Now, he said, I think I want to become a translator, like my mother. Help people understand each other. Sarah smiled. I think she would have liked that. Together, they walked from the assembly hall into an uncertain but hopeful future, while behind them, the Galactic Council began the work of healing from humanity's and the galaxy's darkest secrets finally brought to light. #My mother won't wake up. The desperate cry of an alien boy. Only one human rushed to help,